I'm Stacy Thomas from Orchard Hills. I'm glad you tuned in today. I want to talk to you about a very important subject. Why did my father die of cancer? Why do my children have to suffer so? Why is it so many things go wrong in this world? I pray, I do my best, I read my Bible. What's going on? Why doesn't God hear me? These answers I'm going to answer in just a minute. You please stay tuned.
Sweet Jesus, your grace is sufficient. Oh Lord, you bring life out of death. Holy Spirit, you're moving in spite of the ways we don't understand. We rest in your presence. You are hope when all seems lost. We rest in your presence. You surround us with your joy. We rest in your presence. It's your peace that calms the roar. We rest in your presence. You remind us of your love. Sweet Jesus, your grace is sufficient. Oh Lord, you bring life out of death. Holy Spirit, you're moving in spite of the ways we don't understand. We rest in your presence. You are hope when all seems lost. We rest in your presence. You surround us with your joy. We rest in your presence. It's your peace that calms the roar. We rest in your presence. You remind us of your love. We rest in your presence. You're making us new. We rest in your presence. You're making us new. We rest in your presence. You're making us new. We rest in your presence. You're making us new. Oh, we rest in your presence.
Thank you, Kim. How appropriate for this message. I marvel at how the Holy Spirit puts these things together. I want to talk to you today about what is probably, if you could turn those lights down just a little bit, thank you. What is the biggest issue in Christendom, in the church, that causes more people to turn away from God, more believers to be confused about their walk with God? It is the presence of evil and suffering in this life. And many of you might want to ask, where are you getting your materials? And just a couple of things. God, Freedom, and Evil from Alvin Plantinga. He's a philosopher. God and the Problem of Evil, 5 Views, with William Lane Craig, people like that. Also Ravi Zacharias, heavily on John MacArthur and a few others. And of course, 40 years of experience in ministering to families as they watch their loved ones die and experiencing all the problems and the difficulties of this life in light of Scripture. I was thought about the 3 widows over here to my left. I buried all their husbands sitting in a row. And the most prevalent problem that we face is evil, pain, and suffering. Atheists, agnostics, liberal scholars use it to reject the God of the Bible. But we don't do that. So what is the answer for it? I remember reading years ago Ted Turner's biography, probably 30 years ago. Probably one of the first biographies he ever put out. Maybe it was the only one. But I remember him saying, the reason I don't believe in God. And he said, I don't believe in God because I had a 3-year-old sister who had cancer, and I prayed to God to heal her, and she died. Therefore, I can't trust this kind of God. And so, as far as I know, all of his life, he's rejected Christ on the basis of that event. Now, I understand some of that. So let's look at Psalm 73, to the Word of God, which has the answers to all of life's problems. David is experiencing something. He says, truly, God is good to Israel. He's going to set the stage. To such as are pure in heart, but as for me, my feet had almost stumbled. Now, why are they stumbling? Well, here's the reason they're stumbling. They're stumbling because he sees here in verse 3, for I was envious of the boastful when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. For there are no pangs in their death, but their strength is firm. They're not in trouble as other men, nor are they plagued like other men. Therefore pride serves their necklace. Violence covers them like a garment. Their eyes bulge with abundance. They have more than the heart could wish. They scoff and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily. They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongues walks through the earth. Therefore his people return here, and waters of a full cup are drained by them, and they say, how does God know? That's what the unbelievers say. These ones that are prospering. And is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the ungodly who are always at ease. Now, I want you to hold that thought for just a minute. Jeremiah chapter 12, verse 1. Don't turn there. I just want to give it to you. Righteous are you, O Lord, when I complain to you, yet I would plead my case before you. Why does the way of the wicked prosper? Why do all the treacherous thrive? You plant them, and they take root. They grow and produce fruit. He pours out this diatribe before God about, I don't get it. Here I am called as a young man. I've spent 40 years pleading with the nation of Israel, and it seems like the ones that are your greatest enemies, they're getting along the best, and I'm suffering the most. Is there any answer? Job, chapter 12, verse 6, and of course it's all through Job, but he says, the tents of robbers are at peace, and those who provoke God are secure. So David is not alone, nor you, nor am I. He says, all day long, in verse 14, I have been plagued and chastened every morning. Verse 13, surely I have cleansed my heart in vain, In other words, it seems like I've followed you for nothing. Behold, I would have been untrue to the generation of your children when I thought how to understand this. It was too painful for me. This was so mind-boggling in verse 16 until something happened. I went into the sanctuary of God. Then I understood their end. Then, I want you to concentrate on that. Then I would understood their end. And what we just heard Kim sing. In his presence. There are things we don't have answers for. But in his presence, we find answers. At the sanctuary, why you came to church today, to find answers for the things of your life that plague you. And that's the right place to come. He said, surely you set them in slippery places. You cast them down to destruction. How are they brought to desolation as in a moment they utterly consumed with terrors, as in a dream when one awakes? So, Lord, when you awake, you shall despise their image. Thus my heart was grieved, and I was vexed in my mind. I was so foolish and ignorant. I was like a beast before you. Nevertheless, I am continually with you. You hold me by my right hand. I want you to hold on to that. You will guide me with your counsel, and afterward receive me to glory. Now, the problem still exists that he brought to God at the beginning. But he says, whom have I in heaven but you? And is there none upon earth that I desire besides you? My flesh and my heart fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. For indeed, those who are far from you shall perish. You have destroyed all those who desert you for harlotry. But it is good for me to draw near to God. I have put my trust in the Lord God, the final crescendo. I have put my trust in the Lord God, that I may declare all your works. There's a reason, declaration for what God has done. Now, I wanted you to think about this chronology of thought. Well, if God controls everything, which obviously the Bible says he does, then he's allowing these wicked to prosper. John 19:11 says, Jesus to Pilate. Pilate said, don't you know I've had the power of life over death over you? And Jesus said, you could have no power against me unless it had been given you from above. Satan had to get permission from God to ever touch Job because he had a hedge about him. John 3:27 says this, a man can receive nothing unless it has been given to him from heaven. Does this include Hugh Hefner, I might ask? If so, is God promoting evil? If so, is God promoting evil or allowing all of this treachery that takes place? Glory's been keeping me up, one of the ladies in our church, been keeping me up on a couple. And this particular couple, they plan their lives. They set things in order. They have a retirement home. They got everything ready. They sold their house, and then he was just diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And going through all the problems and all that he's been through, it is, the man loves to sing, yet he can't sing anymore. He loves to swim, but he can't swim anymore because of the complications with the tracheotomy and other things. Life invaded in 6 months, totally changed from a lifetime of preparation. How is that fair? How is that right? Well, let's think about it for just a minute. Earthquakes, blindness, deafness, muteness, all of these things that happen, sex trafficking, cartels, war, cybercrime, disease, loss, all evil is present everywhere. You can't deny its presence. Dostoevsky is a Russian Christian author, and he probably is one of the most famous. And in his most famous book, Brothers Karamazov, he is arguing with his brother, and these are documented cases in Russia where children were tortured, real cases. And he's writing this novel. And this is the way the novel is going about it. He's not trying to argue that God doesn't exist. He grants that. He's no atheist by any means. But he's rebelling against a God who would allow such a thing. And I want to quote a little bit of that. He says, he looks forward to a future where all will be righted. Suffering will be healed. And we will see the victims rise up and embrace their murderers. Everyone will understand what it has all been for. But I can't accept that at the price of one tortured child. The price for the paradise is much too high, he says. It is not God I don't accept, only I must respectfully return him my ticket to paradise. Wow, what a powerful statement. He's simply saying that if this is the kind of God the Bible tells me about, then I will respectfully decline that kind of God. Well, I want you to stay with me, because this is the biggest issue out there. More Christians, when they talk to you, this is where they go to. Unbelievers, this is where they'll go to. They'll come back to this issue because they don't get it. I want to give you a syllogism here, 3 premises, and come to a conclusion. An all-powerful God has the power to stop evil, and God is all-powerful, obviously. An all-knowing God knows how to stop evil, and God is all-knowing. An all-good God would certainly want to stop evil, and God is all-good. Yet, evil exists. Therefore, the God of the Bible does not exist. This is the arguments that atheists and skeptics and so many unbelievers use. Now, where do we go with this? He's basically saying, in this syllogism, God wants to abolish evil, but he can't because he's too weak. And that's not the God of the Bible. He can abolish evil, but he chooses not to, and that makes him evil. Therefore, we've made a value judgment, and we've decided that God, on the basis of our value judgments, is evil, and he's not commensurate with the God of the Bible, because we feel like he certainly would stop it unless there is a greater good in allowing it that God takes credit for. He is saying he is responsible ultimately for it. I want to go into this at much greater detail. C.S. Lewis says, evil is only spoiled goodness. What does he mean by that? There could be no evil where they're not good. There could be no death where there's not life. There could be no terrible, misfortunate domestic circumstances if there was not happy marriages and things of this nature. It couldn't be good apples that there wasn't, it couldn't be a rotten apple that weren't good. Ruined house, wicked souls, deformed bodies, corrupted governments. All of these are from the understanding that there is a good thing, but because of corruption and because of lack and because of deformity, it is other than it was intended to be. Therefore, the good has now become bad. But it could not exist without the original good. Cancer is the invasion of healthy cells and the turning over and making the multiplicity of bad cells. But they couldn't be there where they're not healthy cells to invade. And there are 4 kinds of evil in the world. I want to give you those. One is natural evil. There's earthquakes, tsunamis, the condo in Miami that came down. It was a foundational breakthrough as we understand. Evil, bacteria, disease, death. That's natural evil. Secondly, there's moral evil. The evil of the wicked heart. Jeremiah tells us the heart is desperately wicked. Who can know it? Romans tells us there's none good, no, not one. Every relationship on earth is contaminated with evil. It is by God's grace that we keep from killing one another, which often breaks out in a fallen world. Then there's supernatural evil, the devil and his demons. That brings in another sphere of evil. And then finally there's eternal evil, eternal separation from God. 4 types of evil that are there. Now, what are we going to do about that? Now, all of these philosophers that I've been reading about, and my library is full of them, they produce what we call a theodicy. A theodicy is made of 2 words, theos, God, and deity, which comes from the word
Dikaios, which means righteous. It is a defense of God's righteousness in the face of overwhelming evil. That's what a theodicy is. And you know what they're for? They're to get God off the hook. How can I get my God off the hook for causing all this bad in the world? There must be some logical, reasonable explanation, because I know God is not that way. Well, you're going to see that God doesn't want to get off the hook. He doesn't intend to get off the hook, because he's got something better to offer. I want to give you the views, some of the views. These are not all the views. I want to give you the top. I'll just give you the top 4. In order to appreciate good, we have to have evil. We have to have a choice system, but we can't choose good if there's not evil to decide against. Number 1. Secondly, this is the most popular, free will. This would be certainly a strong Arminianism. What that means is that God's not going to violate free will. He wants people to love him voluntarily so hard and so much that he creates free will, and he backs off the scene, and he allows this evil, even though he doesn't like it, in order for people to voluntarily love him and embrace him, and he must put up with the evil that's out there. Okay? Also, that it does imply that there's a certain element of free will that God's not in control of, which we reject. Thirdly, there's process theology. What that means is God is learning. He doesn't know everything. He's chosen not to know everything. Therefore, he gave free will to his creation. And because of their choices, which he's chosen not to know, or he couldn't know because it hasn't happened yet, the future. So he's catching up all the time and continually reacting to what's going on in the world. And in spite of man's bad choices, he hopes to bring all this together. Well, good luck with that. How in the world is God going to bring together a world in which he doesn't even know what's going to happen? In this kind of world, God is helpless, and so are we, if that's our God. But thankfully, that's not. Finally, it brings us to another solution. That God is in control, that God has ordained evil, that he will use it for his purposes, and they're much greater than the bad that he's allowed. Now, I want to develop that, and I want to show you how it can be developed. First of all, the biblical God does exist. Now, how do I know that? Now, let me just give this for Facebook, and you say, well, you know, there's all kinds of other religions and everything that's got different teachings that think good thoughts and all of these things, and we can move away from this, and we just keep thinking this. I remember this is so funny. I ran for 30 years, 5 to 8, 10 miles or whatever, basically 35 years. So I've got arthritis in my knees and hips. And so I went to the vitamin shop this week, and suffering like you wouldn't believe, especially in my hips. And I said, I want this, and I want, what do you have for arthritis? And she said, I've got this, and I've got that. And she said, and so I was saying, well, how reputable is that? She said, well, I don't know. I said, well, you don't have arthritis, do you? Because she was really flippant about it all. And then she tells me, she says, why don't you just think good thoughts? And I said, that's going to take care of this arthritis? And so we didn't really hit it off like we should have, I guess, because I knew that good thoughts were not going to take care of the arthritis after 35 years of running and wearing out that cartilage. So anyway, but there's that thinking there that we can somehow beat it with our minds. If we will, in denial, escape it and not think about it, we can find this ultimate reality, this other reality that really doesn't exist at all. Well, God does exist, and the Bible is right. How do I know that? Because of all the manuscripts that are available that prove the Bible was written authentically, credibly, close to the time. By 100 A.D., it was all finished. Fulfilled prophecy. The multitudes of all of these early manuscripts for the first 300 years that again attested to the faithfulness of all those eyewitness testimonies, those oral transmissions that were finally put in the Bible and closed out by 100 AD, I can compare it to all kinds of secular literature. There is no close second. All the martyred disciples, the evidence for the resurrection, inside and outside of the Bible. I can go on forever about this. But the Bible's true. You can rely on that. There is no other close second. There is no other religion in the world that is true. 1 Chronicles 29, 11, and 12. Listen to this. David's prayer. He says, yours, O Lord, is the greatness, the power, the glory, the victory, the majesty. All that is in heaven and earth is yours. Yours is the kingdom, O Lord, and you are exalted as head over all. Psalms 115:3. Our God is in the heavens. He does whatever he pleases. 1 Corinthians 4:7. For who makes you differ from one another, and what do you have that you did not receive? Daniel 4:35. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand and say to him, what have you done? Psalms 105:16. He summoned a famine on the land. He broke all the supply of bread. Lamentations 3:37 and 38. Who has spoken and it came to pass unless the Lord has commanded it? Is it not from the mouth of the Most High that good and bad come? Exodus 4:11. So the Lord said to him, who has made man's mouth? Or who makes him mute? Or who makes him deaf? Who makes him seeing or blind? Have I not I, the Lord? He takes credit for all that, bad and good. Now, he doesn't ask us to get him off the hook. He takes full responsibility for the things that have happened. But there's an invitation here, and I want you to just indulge me, if you will. He didn't create them, but he chose not to stop them. Now, the total reason of that is above my pay grade, but man, the reason that we have so much issue with this is man can't rationalize a God that would so impugn against their sensibilities of pain and loss in this life. Yet remember, God drowned the whole world in Noah's flood. Now, I'm not trying to make God out as coarse or hard or bad. I'm just simply trying to give you the full picture. It is heresy to say that the world is evil apart from God's allowance. It's just not true. Now, I want to give you a little syllogism that's correct. God willed evil to exist. He knows the future from the back. He knew what Satan was going to do. He knew what Adam and Eve was going to do. God did not create evil. Demons and man did that. God didn't stop evil. Knowing they would create it, therefore he has ordained it. Why? God has designed evil for a great, great purpose in life. Now, let's look at that purpose and let's see what that is. Now, I'm going to give you a short list, and we're going to have to move fast. Teach men to fear God, to come to him, to chasten unbelievers, to mature believers, to humble believers, to teach the reality of lies and the evil consequences of following this world. That's just a few. That's just a small list. 2 Corinthians 12 gives you a better one. Paul, what did he tell him? He said this twice, to keep me from exalting myself, God has allowed this thorn in my flesh. Well, if you look at there in the Greek, it's angelos, it's a messenger of evil, obviously a demon. It's like God said, I've given you this companion demon to harass you and to humble you. Thank you. Remember Peter? God said to Peter, I love this. God said to Peter, he said, Peter, the devil's asked me to give you to him. And it'd been great if Peter had said, you told him no, right? But God said, no, I didn't tell him no. I told him yes. Wow. And why would you do that? Peter, after you come through this, you strengthen your brethren. Wow. Did he ever strengthen the brethren? He was the rock of the early church. He was the man with Paul in Christendom. It's hard to imagine it without him. but he wouldn't have been ready had God not given him over. Job would not have been ready to see God rather than just hearing God had God not given him over. He blessed him in the end twice as much. He didn't lose any children. They're still waiting for him in heaven. He gained all the way around. But you had to see it from his perspective. Malcolm Muggeridge is probably one of the greatest British journalists that ever existed. He was an atheist, agnostic, turned Christian. Listen to what he says. Contrary to what might be expected, I look back on the experiences that at the same time seemed especially desolating and painful with particular satisfaction. Indeed, I can say with complete truthfulness that everything I learned in my 75 years in this world, everything that has enhanced and truly enlightened my existence has been through affliction and not through happiness, whether pursued or attained. In other words, if it were ever possible to eliminate affliction from our earthly existence, the result would be not to make life delectable, but to make it too banal and too trivial to be endured. This is, of course, what the cross signifies. And it is the cross, more than anything else, that called me inexorably to Christ. I want to read you the Westminster Confession. God from all eternity did by the most wise and holy counsel of his own will freely and unchangeably, notice that, ordain whatsoever comes to pass. Yet so, as neither thereby is God the author of sin, nor is violence offered to the will of his creatures. In other words, he doesn't change their free will, except in knowing what they're going to choose and ordaining what they're going to choose. Nor is the liberty or contingency of second causes taken away, but rather established. In other words, all the different contingencies that were taken place by their free wills has been established. Sinfulness proceedeth only from the creature and not from God, who being most holy and righteous neither is nor can be the author or approver of sin. That's the Westminster Confession, and that's dead on. But you say it's different when it happens to me. You better believe it is. In Ravi's book, Why Suffering, I want to read you a great theologian and philosopher who did his doctoral dissertation on suffering. And he says, listen to what he says. He said, I was raised around people who suffered greatly. My mother had one physical problem after another, and this in part sparked my interest at an early age in the problem of pain and suffering. In seminary, I wrote my Master of Divinity thesis on Job. My doctoral dissertation even focused on the problems of evil and led to the book, The Many Faces of Evil. If anyone had thought about this and was prepared to face affliction, I was. Still, with all that theoretical knowledge, I was unprepared for the suffering and pain I would have to endure. And then he goes on through these different accounts of life, and he says, the emotional and psychological pain, no, listen to this. I want to back up here. As he began to recount, he says that in his experience, the presence of pain and intellectual answers to the problem of pain he found were of no help to him when he faced suffering himself. Now listen to that. This is a doctoral philosopher, theologian, who was in every way prepared to face these painful moments. He says the emotional and psychological pain was unrelenting, and the physical results from the stress and the mental pain were devastating. How can that be, we ask? Well, it's what transpired in his life. On November 4th, 1987, everything changed. My family and when my wife was diagnosed with Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is a genetically transmitted disease involving the premature deterioration of the brain. The symptoms of Huntington's disease are both physical and psychological. Physically, it means the gradual loss of control of all bodily movement. Psychologically, it means memory loss, depression, and as it progresses, hallucinations and paranoid schizophrenia. A slowly developing disease, the symptoms do not become evident until about the age of 30. Over the next 10 to 20 years, it is fatal. Worse for John and his wife Pat, only one parent needs to carry the gene for Huntington's disease to be passed on to their children. They have 3 children, each born with a 50% chance of eventually receiving the same diagnosis. It is difficult, Ravi says, to read about the agony that he saw him experience with him and his wife and his children. But he explains the emotions swung from one extreme to another. In this classic example of how theological knowledge of suffering and evil is combated with true tragic reality, Feinberg admits that when it comes right down to it, what I needed was not intellectual answers. What I needed was someone who understood my pain. Now, what did that mean? You had 2 options. Either you can trust God or turn away from God. Here's what Chesterton says about that. G.K. Chesterton, one of the greatest writers ever been. He says, when belief in God becomes difficult, the tendency is to turn away from him. But in heaven's name, to what? What did Peter say when everybody was leaving? They said, are you guys going too? Peter said, where are we going to go? You've got the words to life. Starting to understand and unravel a little bit of this mystery, I want to get close, if I can, possibly to the real answer. Now, what did Feinberg say? Only godly love, support, and true biblical answers would do. Not glib, God understands, and you just need to trust him and all that kind of stuff that people don't need to hear. Romans 3:5 says, but if our righteousness demonstrates the, listen to this, I'm sorry. But if our unrighteousness demonstrates the righteousness of God, what shall we say? Is God unjust who inflicts wrath? Certainly not. 2 strongest words in Greek, megenita. For then how will God judge the world? Now, when I went to pick out the wedding ring, when I was going to propose to my wife, I went to Citizens Jewelry in downtown Atlanta on Peachtree, and you know what they did? They had these diamonds there, and of course I was looking at the price tag, but finally I said, let me see that one, and he put out a black cloth, and then he put that diamond on it, and I could see perfectly the diamond because it was backdropped, contrasted against pure black. Now, here's what he's saying. He's saying that how can the unrighteousness be demonstrated unless it's against righteousness? Now, if God condones sin, then how would he be qualified to judge and punish and reward the world on the basis of sin? He would not be. Now, let's go on. Israel's unfaithfulness is not going to change the faithfulness of God. It's what he's developing in this argument. Now, he's still going to be true to Israel, and God's still going to work out his plan, even though they think that he's accepted the Gentiles and thrown them out, and how can all this work? God's still got it under control. Now, the reason we don't understand this righteousness, and because we're so familiar with unrighteousness. You want to know how the water is? Don't ask the fish. We've been so indoctrinated with bad stuff that goes on every day, we don't understand the sublime and profound workings of God that is available to us in the Scripture, but it only comes through the acceptance and trust of brokenness and pain and suffering. Now, I want to get to this. I want to develop it more. Now, Romans 5:8 says, but God demonstrates his own love toward us. Now, he's already said he's going to demonstrate his righteousness against the backdrop of unrighteousness. Now he's demonstrating his love against what? In that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. God's love, we're still rebels. God's love, we're sinners. Against the backdrop of that. And then he says, Christ died for us. The presence of sin allows God to demonstrate his love, demonstrate his wrath, demonstrate his mercy, demonstrate his wisdom. Now, The greatest evil that's ever been done on the face of the globe is the crucifixion of Christ. The greatest good that's ever come out of any single event is the crucifixion of Christ. Romans 9:22. What if God, wanting to show, to demonstrate his wrath and to make his power known, I'm quoting Scripture, endured with much long suffering the vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, that he might make known the riches of his glory on the vessels of mercy. Now what is he saying here? If I want to give you all of these riches of my glory, I've got to backdrop that against this cloth of unrighteousness, of sinners, of those that are worthy of wrath, in order that you can see the contrast. No sin, no contrast, no display. John 17, Jesus said in his prayer, I want them to see our glory, God. The glory that we had before the world began. I want them to be with me and you there. Then they will understand the pain and the heartache they've had to endure. Now you can't erase the corollary between suffering and glory. It's all the way through here. Now, God, with infinite holiness, it says here, he endured with patience all of this sin. He endured all of this evil. He endured all of this wrath. He didn't enjoy one bit of it. He has no delight in the death of the wicked. So, God wants us to understand. Now, this is where the rubber hits the road. Isaiah walked in Isaiah 6. King Uzziah died. That was a bad thing because King Uzziah was a good king. And he said, I don't know what we're going to do. He was king for about 42 years. What's going to happen to us? And then it's as if the vision the worldly reality just falls away, and he's in the throne room of heaven. And the cherubim are singing. What are they singing? Holy, holy, holy. Kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. And he's transferred from loss and death into glory in a contrast that he can't really describe. And all he can do is say, woe is me. And God ends up saying, go. You've received this commission, now go. What did David say? That I may declare your works. We're getting closer. Now, I want you to understand something. God's never going to owe you. I heard a seminary student say one day, oh, this is incredible. It's unbelievable. It's so powerful. One seminary student said, you know what? I left everything. His wife had, I'm just going to be honest, he had just run off with somebody else. Here he is in seminary. He said, I left everything. I quit my career. I did all this stuff. I've got 2 children at home. And he said, what has God given back to me after all these sacrifices? And then there's another seminary student. He was at a little church. And here's what he said. The church was voting him out. And while he was at school at Southwestern, his house burned, his wife burned up, and his 2-year-old daughter. As he gave his testimony in tears, he said, as I walked over the charred rubble of what was left of our world, I picked up a half-burned doll. And all of a sudden, the presence of God so engulfed me, I started praising him for the 2 years I had my baby. I started praising him for the 12 years I had my wife. And he said, I found sanity when I was going insane in the midst of praise. Now, I want to tell you this. God will never owe you for what you've given up for him. On the contrary, you'll get back far, far more than you ever realized. Now, God wants to bring us into this reality. Isaiah 64:4 says, for since the beginning of the world, men have not heard nor perceived by the ear. Since the beginning of the world, men have not perceived by the ear, nor has any I, listen to this, seen any God besides you. You are totally unique God who acts for the one who waits for him. Buddha doesn't do that. Allah doesn't do that. Nature doesn't do that. Universal energy doesn't do that. Only the God of the Bible does that. Unique. Romans 9:14 says, what shall we say then? Is there unrighteousness with God? Again, megenata, God forbid. James Stewart of Scotland, listen to what he says, the commentator on Psalm 68:18. He said he led captivity captive. What does that mean? It means this. The very triumph of his foes, those that were against him, he used for their own defeat. He compelled their dark achievement to subserve his ends, not theirs. They nailed him to the tree, not knowing that by that very act they were bringing the world to his feet. They gave him a cross, not guessing that he would make it a throne. They flung him outside the gates to die, not knowing at that very moment they were lifting up all the gates of the universe to let the king come in. They thought to root out his doctrines, not understanding that they were implanting imperishably in the hearts of men the very name that they were intending to destroy. They thought they had God with his back to the wall, pinned and helpless and defeated. They did not know that it was God himself who had tracked them down. He did not conquer in spite of dark mystery of evil. He conquered through it. Romans 9:19. Who are you to say to me, God says, that I am at fault? Wow. I can imagine an imaginary conversation with Job when he says, I suffered the blunt of your sins. I carried the harshness. I carried the beatings. I took the brutality. I took the rejection. I took every bit of that. And you question me? Job, out of the 50 billion possible people that would ever live, I know every single possible life they could live under every single circumstances. I know every contingency that could ever exist in their minds, the multitudes of their thoughts, and I have so orchestrated that I have put them in perfection for you. I held you safely in my hand, Job. And I took all the evil that belonged to you, that you deserved. Therefore, wait before you judge me, Job. What does Job respond? Job 42:3, you ask me who it is that hides counsel without knowledge. Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. I see it this way. You have three reactions to all the suffering and evil. Number one, you can feel like you've been punished for something and you're a really bad person. That's not going to give you any understanding. It's just going to leave you an ignorant sufferer, blaming yourself, guilty. Secondly, you can say God's ways are past finding out. You just have to live with it, and there develop within your heart a smoldering bitterness to God, to the loss that you've endured. That he comes in and invades your life with no warning and no answers. That's your second alternative. Or you can go to the third. God does give us insights as to why we suffer. We have not been abandoned. We have been chosen for something great, which we may not fully understand now, but we will soon, and we will be able to praise God in it and through it, and on the other side of it, and the only proper response is praise. Now, theology is easy. Living it is something else. My most recent funeral was with a father leaving 2 sons and a wife with cancer. He hung on for months. He hung on much longer than the doctors thought he would. And how many times did I go see him, either in the hospital or in his home, and pray for him that God would raise him up and heal him? And that's what everybody was. He'd have a good result, then he'd have a bad result, and all these other things. But finally, being in hospice, thinking that he was going to die quickly. He didn't. He hung on, and he hung on, and he hung on. And one of his sons, who had obviously been weeping, came to me. And he said, "Stacy, can you just help me for a minute?" We went out in the hallway. I said, "What is it?" He'd been crying. He said, "I don't get it. If God's not going to heal my daddy, why doesn't he answer my prayer to let him die? Why must he suffer like this?" All I could say to him, "Trust me. He knows, and he cares, and he loves him, and he loves you." That's all I can tell you at this time. Now, I want you to get this. It doesn't mean we're Christian fatalists who just have to resolve and resign to the bad things that happen in life. David said over and over, "How long, O God?" Jeremiah was crying out for some kind of justice, some kind of explanation. It doesn't mean we can't go to the throne room of God and say, "God, please bring thy kingdom in and change these circumstances commensurate with your promises. God, do this, I pray." It doesn't mean you don't pray that. But it does mean, in the end, that you resign yourself to it. I'm going to give you two personal examples. I know we're over time, but I think it's important that I give them to you. This came home to me about 9 years ago when our house burned. Now, we'd lived in Parsonage most of our lives, and that was about 1,100 square feet. Our kids didn't have their own bedrooms and all that kind of stuff. We finally got our dream house. Now, our kids had bedrooms of their own, and I can still remember there in a room 9 clothes baskets, those plastic ones or Tupperware ones with the little holes in them, you know. They were all with the snapshot pictures that had been taken all my kids' lives. Now here they were, teenagers, college, all this kind of stuff, and some of the little ones. It was every bicycle ride. When they first learned to ride a bicycle, had their first tooth out, their first piano recital, all those things filled up with 9 baskets. My wife put those in different volumes of books and put them on the shelves, and they totally filled one entire shelf with all of those big volumes of pictures. Every sermon that I'd ever preached for 30 years, gone. All the books that I'd accumulated my entire life, my grandfather's Bible, all my 4 Bibles, 2 cats, 2 dogs, gone. But that wasn't the most serious loss. One of the greatest challenges was what our family went through, and it was particularly challenging to me. One of my sons was going through something that was connected to a lot of things that was going on. And we didn't have a house, so I went into the RV. I was all by myself. And as I poured out my heart to God, I was out there for about 4 or 5 hours. I started in Psalms 1, and I prayed all the way to Psalms 150, and I personalized and customized. Every time David prayed, I prayed, and I connected that to my son who was about to go through something, going through something, and I couldn't deliver him. And I remember crying out to God. I said, "God, it's my son. You got a son." Now, God didn't say this in a voice. And this is a paraphrase of what God said to me. But in my spirit, God was saying, "I know what you're feeling. Yes, I do have a son. I do. And I know the way you're feeling better than anything that you could ever understand. Because my son was also in harm's way. I didn't answer his prayer. It still rings in my ears, Stacy. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? I watched him humbled, brutalized, mutilated, spikes put in his hands. I watched all of that take place. I did not rescue him. So don't tell me I don't know what you're feeling. I do. And in that moment, something released in me. I've had about 3 occasions in my entire life where God was as if he was on his knees beside me. I'm here. I'm in the middle of this with you. And I did all of that for you. But that's not all. It was also saying, look at the outcome now, Stacy. Look at it now. My son, the victim, has now become the victor. My son, the crucified, has now become the crowned. He now, for all of eternity, will reign and rule. And I have put every name under his name and his name above every name, and every knee will bow to him, and every tongue confess that he is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. For all of the ages, it was better for him, and it's better for you. Trust me, Stacy. I want to tell you something. If ever God was in that place, he was there. I can't really describe it, but Jesus was carrying on. Or God was, the Father telling me, Stacy, the price I paid with him was worth it for you and for all posterity. And now what do we sing? Worthy is my Son, the Lamb slain before the foundation of the world, to receive blessing and honor and glory and power and riches and wisdom and strength for all of eternity. It will be sung because of what he did and I allowed him to do, and what he prayed and I did not answer. Don't you get it? There's something better coming, Stacy. You don't get it. You don't totally understand it. But I do. I remember walking down the aisle one time at First Baptist of Atlanta, and I said, Dr. Stanley preached a message, and I said, I want to be like Jesus. And he said, are you sure you want that? And we just read that in Psalms 73, and he says, you hold me by my right hand. And it says, if God says to us through our greatest suffering, take my hand and walk with me. I have not abandoned you. I have chosen you for something far greater than you could ever understand. I don't ask why anymore. I say, wow, I was counted worthy to suffer for him. What did Peter and John say after they'd been beaten? He said, John, praise God, we were privileged and counted worthy to suffer for his name. What does the Bible say in Romans 8:18? I consider the sufferings of this present time not worthy to be compared with the glory that which shall be revealed in us. I close with this. Casting Crowns just came out with a song. And the day it was released, their drummer died, who was one of those that made the song, obviously. He was killed in a motorcycle accident. And the song is about a man losing his wife to cancer. She's diagnosed. He sees her through the treatments. He sees her, she loses her hair. He sees her when she's wrapped up with some kind of turban. He sees her, he hugs her, he grieves with her. I'm not going to give you the full song. But he goes through it all, just like she did. And then they sing this song. I'm going to give you just one couple of stanzas of it. The only scars in heaven, they won't belong to me and you. There'll be no such thing as broken, and all the old will be made new. And the thought that makes me smile now, even as the tears fall down, is that the only scars in heaven are the hands that hold you Now, let's pray. Father, I thank you and praise you that you have a plan that far out excels, outweighs, overabundantly gives back to us something far beyond anything we could ever believe. We think sometimes our suffering's in vain. What did David say to you, God? Are not my tears in your bottle? Is there anything I've ever lost that you're not totally aware of? That you don't have in your heart? Never to be lost? Father, I thank you that you so loved us, that you didn't give us this trivial, banal, easy, happiness-saturated world in which we would not know the contrast of pain and glory, of suffering and praising, and of trusting you in the midst of pain and learning how to trust you in a way that far excels human rationality. Father, thank you and praise you for so giving to us this beautiful, beautiful blessing, if you'll allow me to say it, God, of pain and suffering. We thank you and praise you, and we will sing your praises for all of eternity. Worthy is the Lamb. You did it right. You did it for us, and you will never, never have to say that you owe us. God, you gave it all when you gave your Son. For it's in Jesus Christ's name we praise and praise you. Amen. Thank you for hearing the message today. If you want to know more about Orchard Hills Church, I pray you'll go to Orchard Hills Church at orchardhillschurch.com. If there's any way we can minister to you on a greater level, please contact us. If you want more information about this message, other messages, or how we can minister to you, please contact us. May God bless you, and you have a great day.
Make me burn for you. Your love is here in my heart. Set fire to these lifeless waves and breathe your life in me. Breathe your life in me. You have broken